Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Daredevil Born Again, Season 1, Episode 6. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, first and foremost, we had the situation with Muse now becoming a more publicly known situation. It is interesting what sparked this was, there was a body found, but what really sparked all of this was the sanitation. And isn't that the same guy that was at the bank last episode? I think so. He was the dude that's like, oh, I got these heirlooms and stuff. I think that's the same guy, but maybe I'm mistaken. Well, he's the one that ended up finding out that there's a serial killer accidentally. Because he was, not necessarily he was like, oh, serial killer, but it's like, oh, I'm getting rid of these murals that are around, and so I need stronger stuff because it's like, I can't really get it off even with my strongest power washer. So I did a chemical analysis to find out, like, well, what I need to start, incorporating to break the stuff down. Oh, it's human blood in it. And it's like, cool. And I even love that line from Fisk later on when he's talking, like, he's laughing about where the cops are, oh, we got to do this and that. He's like, we're not going to sound the alarm, because if we sound the alarm, this killer could go underground and wait us out. Two, the fact of the matter is, the NYPD is so ineffective. It took someone from sanitation to find out we had a serial killer. I didn't learn that from you guys. I learned that from a sanitation worker. That is kind of crazy, and that is kind of wild how that plays out like that. So yeah, but they're like thinking Muse's victims are up to 60. I was like, Jesus Christ. Because they're like, yeah, like, it could be more. Because also, like, you have to go back and look through some of his older murals. Like, we have no idea how long he's been active and the people he chooses. He probably chooses people that people won't really notice disappear. But as Angela pops up this episode, she points out, my uncle was looking into people who've been disappearing. And, like, and it's probably like people who don't matter or wouldn't matter, maybe. The fact is he was able to kind of go so long, like, yeah, people go missing, and sadly some people just are never found. But I think it's like, if you are in certain, situations or whatever, certain people disappear, no one really goes looking for them, because you're just, it's just like, the forgotten type of people, those who, like, kind of the system doesn't keep an eye on type of situations. We don't know. We don't know how Muse ends up choosing his victims. Obviously, jumping ahead, chose Angela because Angela stepped into the lion's. But I also thought it was interesting her stopping by the office, and she's talking to Matt about, like, right, what's going on. And Matt's like, what should I do? She's like, literally anything, Matt. The fact of the matter, because he's like, I'd leave this to the cops. She's like, the cops are most likely the people who killed my uncle. Why would I ever go to them for help? But it's like, what am I? I'm just a lawyer. She's like, anything. You're a big, powerful lawyer. You got this nice office. But when I'm asking you just do anything at all, you're just being like, nah. You'll fight for the little guy, but when I'm bringing this to you, you're just like, nah. Especially because for Angela, she didn't feel like she had anyone she could trust. This is a guy who fought for your uncle, who made sure your uncle didn't get locked up, because you like, nah, this guy believes in the right thing. But even that line from her saying, like, you know what my uncle said to me 2 days before he got shot? She was like, basically, you can't rely on anyone, and if you need something done, you might as well do it yourself. Which is, it all ties in thematically, which I think is so ironic that the episode that we see that Matt is praying, because we've seen him kind of pray a little. We saw him outside the church kind of praying. We saw him kind of in the courtroom, which is sort of his pseudo church in episode 3, kind of doing a little bit of a prayer, but not really. But he even says it to Heather, where it's like, yeah, like, I kind of, because she was like, whoa, you pray? And he was like, yeah. He's like, yeah, I kind of stop every once in a while. But it's like, I wonder, is this the first time he's prayed since Foggy died? I wonder. I do think that was interesting. Like, obviously, the montage of everything he's done. It's like, obviously, Hector, his conversations with Hector, the whole opening of episode 1, Foggy's death, plus him fighting Bullseye, plus what he did in the bank situation last episode, just like every instance of him, that daredevil in him being torn between, like, that calling tugging at him more and more. But yeah, like, the point is, the first episode we see Matt praying, it's also the same episode he suits up again, which is ironic. You would think him praying again would be more so reason for him not to suit up, but once again, just everything culminating in the way that it does. And once again, the duality of this show, where you just have like Matt struggling more and more. Just can't. How long can you just sit on the sidelines? Well, you can't. There probably is stuff he could do as Matt Murdock. It's like you could call the cops and let them know, but it's like, will that really do anything when you know there are corrupt cops amongst them? Then it's like, but you also don't want to do anything as Daredevil. It's that interesting thing where it's almost like you're so busy trying not to give into your other side, you're stagnant. It's like maybe you have made progress, but you yourself are starting to feel the stagnation. You are starting to feel the pull of the other side. The devil whisper in your ear, "Come on, Matt, suit up. Come on, Matt. The world needs you. The streets need you. This city needs you. Come on." Come on. All the temptation has been there. Once again, he's already back to some extent in fighting form, because we saw him training up in episode 4. We see him kind of smirking and doing his Daredevil thing during the bank robbery situation. So it's there. But going back to the duality of it, where we have Fisk on the other end of things, doing what he's supposed to do as mayor. Then he still has that other world kind of like jumping down his throat, where he has Luca showing up being like, "Hey, Mr. Mayor, yeah, about that 1.8, I ain't going to do that." And Fisk is like, "Cool. Now it's going to be 2.8 for got to get that little extra on top, just to kind of middle finger you for doing what you're doing." Because Luca's kind of like, "Right, this isn't your game anymore, old man. Like you were kind of a fossil. You're geriatric in this game, and also you're out of this game. So go ahead, do mayor stuff." He's like, "Oh, look at all these books. I bet you haven't even read all of them. I bet you haven't even read any of them. It's like, this whole thing is a facade. I know who you are. Yeah, you might have been the kingpin, but you lost a step or two. You ain't you anymore." And it's just like, Fisk is just like, I want to kill you. I want to wring and strangle your scrawny little neck, if he could. But it's like, once again, you got to play his role. And he brings this up to Vanessa. Vanessa is so sly. Like, the look she gives him sometimes throughout this episode, it feels like, I think she recognizes the signs that Fisk is trying so hard to hide that he is Kingpin. That part of him is slipping through. Even him putting on a jacket and being like, "Oh, I guess they don't fit anymore." It's like, as we see, when he really kind of gets in his Kingpin bat, he's not eating healthy. He's kind of eating a little, more terribly, and not eating as healthy as he is, because he's trying to present a certain front. But it's like that craving as Kingpin manifests itself. It's like, right, your vice, like when you ignore one vice, another can kind of pop up, or like they can kind of go in tandem, where it's just like, by indulging in the Kingpin, he's indulging, himself, like meal-wise as well. So it is fascinating, but it definitely feels like Vanessa has something up her sleeve. And I brought this up last episode. I'm like, you don't think she's the one that let Luca's gang know about that diamond from last episode or not? Because once again, we never got answers to who, like, how they got access to that key and who's, like, I don't know what that is. So I am curious. Like, she just gives you out that vibe, like, oh, she's up to something. Once again, she's been kind of running the game while Fisk was, indisposed. And so for her, she's all about, like, she doesn't, like, I think she's fine with the facade of it all, but the fact is we're completely ignoring the underworld. Like, I think she's definitely got to be, like, still orchestrating stuff and working on stuff behind Fisk's back. That's why I was like, that whole Luca thing last episode might be her. But she's crafty enough to definitely, and especially when we have these whole conversations about, like, oh, does she feel safe with Wilson? And she's like, should I? Where it's like, yeah, like, you've already kind of betrayed him, having an affair, and now it's like you're potentially doing some other stuff behind his back. Like, I don't know. Especially like when he left that meeting, that kind of, because he's trying to gather funding for what he wants, and when he was leaving, that devilish smile across her face made me go, what are you up to? Is it, or are you setting the stage because you want Wilson, just like basically everyone like wants Matt to suit up again? Maybe in her way, it's almost like, I need you, Wilson, to stop with all this nonsense. You can be the mayor and stuff like that, sure, but you need to be the kingpin. I mean, she has her own route as kind of the queen pin and stuff. So that's why I'm curious. Is she trying to get Wilson out of the way, or is it a situation of, no, I'm going to pull you back to the dark side. I don't fully know what her motivation is. Like what for one, what she's doing and why she's doing it. It's going to be interesting to find out. Staying on the conversation, and obviously the ladies in our respective characters' lives, I did think it was interesting. Heather trying to talk to Matt. She's like, right, you were involved in a bank robbery. He was like, no, I knew I'd be fine. She's like, because of Faith. He's like, yeah, something like that. And even the fact is, and once again, that kind of indicates like they spend enough time around each other where she was like, wait, you pray? Because she probably hadn't heard anything up until now. But two, her like writing a book on vigilantes and the whole conversation of, oh, is wearing the mask your true self or is it an excuse to go animalistic? And Matt's just like, haha, maybe a little both. She's like, oh, like, you've represented vigilantes in the past, so could I sit down with one? And she's like, could you hook me up with Frank Castle? And she's like, the Punisher. You want to interview the Punisher? She's like, bad idea. And he's like, no, sounds like solid idea. Frank's not one for interviews, especially considering Matt's most recent run-in with him. It's like, yeah, I'm probably not in a position to really be asking Frank for favors right now, especially the way our last conversation ended. But that's going to be really interesting. That's kind of a conundrum in itself of having a therapist girlfriend where it's just like, she's not going to try and psychoanalyze you, but she is someone that recognizes, oh my God, like you went through something traumatic. I mean, anyone would, but I'm sure it's even more there in her head because she's a therapist, which I'm like, I'm not saying like every therapist is going to therapize you, which I just think that's ironic too, considering like the lines later on between Angela and Matt where Angela was like, I don't like people therapy talking to me, which Matt was like, was I doing that a little bit? She's like, yeah, you were. He's like, okay. Because she's like, I hate it. He's like, yeah, to be fair, I hate it too. And it's like, it almost feels indicative a little bit of that conversation with Heather. She wasn't trying to, but it's like, she was coming from like, but also it's like, hey, I'm your girlfriend. We haven't used the word, but it's kind of insinuating. I mean, we are seeing each other that I'm going to come at this place of I'm concerned, but there's also a little bit of that therapist that slips out. It's part of your career and your occupation, so I don't think you will ever be able to fully shut off that side of your brain. It's just about how you're able to control, like, how much you let that seep out into your relationship, because you kind of therapizing your, like, therapy talking your significant other could cause problems later down the road, I'm sure, but once again, I don't think that was her intention, but it felt a little like that, but that could just be me reading way too much into that, so. But anyway, circling back to Fisk, his attempts to try and gather money has not worked, because it is that situation of he's still looked down upon because of, we are the powerful people of this city. We kind of run things, and we get, as that lady said, we kind of dictate who gets to come to the table and who gets to eat, so don't forget that. And even just being like, yeah, don't, the flowers are lovely. Let your wife know we enjoy them. Where it just feels like, that's why I feel like maybe Vanessa is having a secret power grab. So Fisk leaving and be like, oh, tell my goodbyes. And Vanessa's probably looking at it as an opportunity of, well, let me just slip in here. Like, once again, it seems like there's more respect for Vanessa than there is. But also it's like, because she came from the art world and stuff like that before she got mixed up with Fisk, I'm wondering if some of that's translating over where it's just like everyone associates Fisk with who he was, and it's just like it's a little bit of his dad coming out too, where it's like feeling less than of like, oh, I come from this background. They're like, oh, because they're chalking it up. They're like, oh yeah, a lot of your fortune comes from like ports and stuff like that. He's like, yes, but I've had other money avenues, just like making it seem like just don't pigeonhole me into thinking you know where my money comes from. It feels like it's that old money versus new money type of conversation that was happening, but it's just like people being so dismissive of him. Hell, we even had an appearance from Jack, which I was like, hey, Jack! I was so curious, like, because like when there was the swordsman was shown, I was like, they were like, oh yeah, there's some guy fighting some crime on the streets with a sword. I was like, when you said the swordsman, I was like, as in Jack? And lo and behold, I could have sworn I remember hearing someone talk about Jack being in this. I don't know if I remember or not. I think I remember someone saying that. But yeah, like Jack is there to kind of warn him about like, yeah, this room. It's like, yeah, like you need to be careful and be mindful of this room that you're in. And Fisk is like, was that a threat? He was like, no. This is how it is. Because he had the whole conversation too of like, oh, like, this whole vigilante thing. He was almost kind of implying like it's not going to go the way you want it to. He's like, I'm surprised you would even raise that specter. You know, like why would you almost like build your whole entire like not entire platform, but a good chunk of your platform on this whole anti-vigilante right side of things, which we'll get to in a little bit. But yeah, I'm also curious, where does Jack stand? Like, I wonder, he helped out at the end of Hawkeye, so I'd assume him and Kate are good, but I'm just so curious, like, what happened to you post Eleanor getting arrested? Because they were engaged, right? I mean, that's what I was about to tell. I was like, they were never married. They were engaged, if I remember correctly. So it's not like you probably had to split too much. You probably suffered some backlash from, hey, the person you were with kind of went into jail. We don't know where that stands. What happened, since Hawkeye in that regard. So, I mean, but he's still running those circles. So he's, it's so interesting because it's almost that thing of if you didn't know, like, Jack being who he was, I mean, he just seems like some dude in that room, but it's just kind of a nice thing of like, well, he would be in that inner circle and stuff like that, the top echelon of people. So, but also like, well, we also know like he's not completely a bad guy. The show kind of painted him as a bit of a bad guy, but it's like, no, he's actually kind of a goofy dude, but he's actually, and obviously it's kind of a tonally different thing because like Hawkeye had its goofy elements. It's meant to be a little more lighthearted. This is, you see him in a more serious tone, standing up to Kingpin. I mean, you've technically crossed paths before, but not directly. I wonder, does he know about the whole Hawkeye situation? Once again, how much is canon? How much are you just like being like, we're not fully acknowledging that, but we kind of are? Like, who? I mean, you kind of have to acknowledge that considering Maya shot him in the face. For a second, I almost forgot Echo's real name. Like, I've always just said Echo, but I was like, oh, right, Maya. It finally came to me because I was like, oh yeah, like I always forget Maya's real name. But either way, so it's like you can't fully not acknowledge that. I just thought that was interesting. That's why I'm like, he might not have known. Like, I mean, once again, Jack was dealing with like, was it Tracksuit Mafia people he was dealing with at the time, helping out him and the LARPers, I think were. While Kate and Hawkeye were dealing with them as well as Fisk himself. But anyway, what I thought was so interesting though is Fisk's frustration with like how he's a man that's all about control and he wants things to work the way he wants them to. And so when that control is being taken away from him, he kind of goes to the other extreme. It's like, no more handling this like Mayor Fisk. Let's hang on to this in a very Kingpin style. I even love him bringing up, he's like, oh yeah, like, we're going to make a special anti-vigilante task force to go after Muse. Oh, and here are the people. And it's like, Gallo is like, these are literally all the bad apples. He's like, yeah, a subculture, some people might call a gang. But he was like, I would say, what was the specific term he used? It was kind of like, essentially, he was calling them motivated. There was something else to it, but he was calling them motivated. And so he rallies his speech in front of him. And when he's rallying this speech, it's like, oh, this isn't the mayor talking to some cops. This is the Kingpin talking to a gang. We've seen him have these conversations rallying a group. So you're just like, and that one cop, it's like, oh yeah, like this guy was selling oxy to like an 11-year-old. So my captain didn't see it that way when I, got the guy to, confess the truth. And Fisk is trying to say like, right, you guys are labeled these bad apples. You are kind of misjudged or misunderstood. But now it's like, right, vigilantes are out there doing bad. You guys need to go out there and you're going to be this shining example because. So, once again, I always have to stress this and preface this. I'm not the comic book dude. I know a little bit of comic book stuff just because I've heard people talk about it. I've watched stuff, so I've picked up some, like, TV shows and stuff. I've watched TV shows and movies, so I know some comic book lore. I always say I have slightly above average, like, DC and Marvel knowledge, just because of that. I think I remember someone, talked about some of the inspiration, like, some of the inspirations that this show might be taken from comic book wise, some of the Daredevil runs. And apparently there was a run where Fisk did lead on like an anti-vigilante thing, but he kind of used bad guy. I think it was like specifically a group of villains he used to do it. So I guess these dirty cops, these Punisher cops, are kind of filling that void where you're just like, oh, I feel it now. Like you're trying to like take some bad guys to do some good, and you're kind of willing to give them a lot of leeway. I'm like, man, it feels like that could severely backlash on you if word gets out about like these cops kind of going above and beyond, and him even once again very much in a gang way, like, oh, here I am, I'm equipping you. It's not in any official capacity. You're not meeting them at like a station or something. It seemed like maybe like a car garage you're meeting them at. If it's like, yo, this seemed shady. Once again, doesn't feel like Mayor talking to the cops. It feels like Kingpin talking to a gang, and rallying them and outfitting them with stuff. So I'm like, cool. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, especially if Matt's out there as Daredevil and he's going to cross paths with the cops, who he's already got beef with because of the Hector situation, but also like they're going to have beef with him being a vigilante. So it's open hunting season on vigilantes in a lot of ways. It's like, yes, this is meant for Muse, but it's meant to be against, once again, anti-vigilante group. So it's against everybody. It's hunting season for vigilantes. So it's going to be interesting to see how that carries out going forward. But obviously, Angela not willing to let stuff go. Because for her, it's like, I'm going to look into something, because she's like, someone needs to carry on what my uncle fought for and believed in and what he was trying to do before he died. So for that, it almost makes me wonder, that scream he heard before he died, could that have been Muse taking a victim? Because at the time I was like, could it be like, oh, like, was that someone actually in peril and whoever it was that shot him used that opportunity to do it? Or was that a setup of, oh, someone screams so he can get drawn out? But I'm also wondering, like, could that be what he was out there investigating? He was going out there not looking for trouble. Well, looking for trouble in a way, sure. But he wasn't just on patrol. He might have been investigating that, considering that was like one of the things he was working on. So I'm curious if that scream now in retrospect had anything to do with it. Because obviously Muse did kill like 2 more people this episode. These women who came across him, because they're like, oh my God, Muse, can we get a photo with you? And then they saw the mask and they got a little creeped out, and he proceeded to murder them. So, but yeah, Angela going to investigate. I was hoping, I was like, please tell me Matt's already down there investigating and you run into him. And the moment it cut away from her, I was like, cool, it's not Matt, it's Muse. Especially because I think it literally cuts to Matt, listening about the tunnels and stuff. And I love the back and forth between, like, once again, that duality cutting back between what Matt's doing and what Fisk is doing. But Matt was already investigating the tunnels because what Angela said did stick with him. But then he gets called from her mom, like, yo, like, did you... It's like, right, I'll handle it. And he calls 911, but then he stops himself. It's that thing of Matt just needed the perfect excuse, and this was one. But is it to demonize Matt? Because also, if he didn't do what he did, Angela would be dead. It's like the cops would not have been able to join up and like get down there in time. It would have been too late. So he saved a lot of times just saying, fuck it, I can handle it myself. But there's also the element of you kind of just needed the right motivation in it. But not just motivation. To some degree, I think we can all acknowledge you also needed an excuse. Well, like Frank said. So he says, fuck it, suits up and goes. And luckily gets to Angela in time. I thought it was interesting because you could tell they were making a parallel to like the Bullseye Foggy situation, where it's like he's having to listen to her heartbeat, making sure she's okay. But came in. I love that whole thing where like Muse is looking down the train track and you just see Matt hauling ass, and then like basically like zip lines towards him and starts beating that ass. I'm actually surprised Muse can fight, so I'm curious what his background is. Like, I wasn't expecting you to put up any form of a fight. Like, you're like landing, like you're kicking and punching, like, and dodging, like you have some fighting experience. So I wasn't expecting that. You aren't just some random killer. You can actually fight and fend for yourself. So that was interesting. But yeah, Matt's whooping that ass, but he's also trying to check on like Angela. Like I said, it's that interesting thing of like everything coming in a little full circle. You felt like you failed Foggy while you were dealing with Bullseye, because that's all you could really do in that moment. At least with Angela, you're dealing with Muse. It gives you an outlet for all the rage you've been building up until this point in time. And also you feel responsible because you couldn't do anything for Hector, but you can do something for Angela, especially because Angela came to you for help and you did nothing. Now you're doing something. So there's layers to that. So I enjoyed that whole fight sequence and stuff like that. It's so dope. It's like, yep, everyone's getting what they want. It's like Matt suited up, whooping ass again. There was even this moment during the fight where it seemed like Muse was landing some blows, but Matt was just tanking him. He was taking him and then went back to fighting. It's just kind of like, that adrenaline rush, I think. But cutting back and forth between that and then Fisk. Fisk coming down with the axe. You're like, oh, that can't be good. And the moment he opens the door for Adam Gase, he's like, oh, yeah, like, Vanessa will want me to let you go. And I was like, you're not using that to chop him up, are you? You're going to give that to him to even the playing field. And he makes a whole point of it where it's just like, when I was young, I was a boy, I fought men 3 times my size. And it talks about men who were used to using their hands versus those who aren't. And I was like, oh, you're giving him that axe. It's like, oh, I want to make this fair. And so he gives Adam the axe and proceeds to whoop that ass. Oh my God, does it just seem like such an unfair, and like he even breaks the handle of the axe at one point in time. And it's just like, just having him laying on the table and just like smacking him, hitting him, even throwing him against like a brick cylinder, like kind of cracking it. We see like some bricks fall off it. You're like, yo, man, the Kingpin obviously is the beast that he is. Then afterwards, dragging him back into the cell. It's like, I don't know if he's dead or not. He might be. Like, why not, like, why drag him back in the cell if he's not dead? Did you bother checking if he was dead? I don't know. Maybe you don't care. It's just so fascinating because he's just sitting there, blood on his hands, and just being like, there's almost like this smile, this satisfaction of just kind of like, because he took, like, Matt's kind of taking all his frustrations that have been building up out on Muse. Kingpin's doing the exact same thing. Like I said, just like the moment Kingpin's like punching and beating the shit out of Adam, you have especially that final part of the battle where like Matt like takes his batons, takes the wire, and starts like hanging Muse to knock him out. But he ended up getting, I was like, there's no way it's going to end like this, right? And of course not, because Muse ends up getting away. So I thought that was fascinating. But luckily he ended up saving Angela and told her like, right, she's like, Daredevil? And he's like, yes, I'm here. I got you. So it's like, what do you do from here, Matt? You slipped up. You got back into your costume. What are you going to do, Kingpin? I mean, you've been doing all this stuff in secret anyway. And it's like, is it really I mean, to be fair, the way Adam was looking, you had already beaten the piss out of him, I guess, like when you initially captured him. But now you beat the piss out of him even more. Might be like on the verge of death. I don't know if you're going to bring in a secret doctor to treat him, or how that situation is going to play out. I don't think Fisk really thought that far ahead. It's just kind of like, here's an outlet, because obviously things have been building for him. The city stuff, the pushback, being called, the whole being considered a union buster back in episode 4, all the like annoying way that people look down upon him at the party, this whole Muse situation. Vigilantes in general, it all just eating away at him until he needed an outlet to kind of pop off on somebody, and he got it. It just like Matt was looking for an excuse to suit up, Fisk was kind of looking for an excuse to finally just fully like embrace Kingpin again to some extent before he has to put that away, just from peering eyes and stuff. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.